Hi everyone, Cam here from Yes Auto, and today I'm driving a very important and also very controversial car. It is, of course, if you've read the title, the new Ford Mustang Mach-E. Now it's Ford's first proper mass-produced electric car, and it's hoping that if it uses the Mustang name, it'll generate a bit of hype around its EV. So what I want to find out today is, does it do justice to the Mustang name, and also explain why it could be the saviour of the iconic V8 engined muscle car. But before I get into the review, remember to hit the like button and subscribe for more awesome videos just like this one. Okay, so let's address the elephant in the room here. It's called a Mustang and it wears the Mustang badge, but it's not a Mustang as we know it. But I think Ford has been really clever here. So there's a lot of electric cars out there today that aren't really that sporty. They're all about being green and saving seals and polar bears. Whereas Ford has tried to make the electric car sexy, give it some performance edge, make it a proper sports utility vehicle. So we've got Mustang looks and a sportier drive. And the idea is that if you're a Ford lover, you'd have a Mach-E from Monday to Friday, and on the weekends, you would drive your regular Mustang. But this car could also serve as something a bit like the Porsche Cayenne. Now the Cayenne is known for saving the 911. If they didn't do it, there would be no point in making the 911 because it really wasn't making all that much money. So, because SUVs are super popular, the Mustang Mach-E could be the car that flies off the shelves, lowers the company's emissions, and allows them to make V8 engined muscle cars. But this thing does look like a Mustang if you squint a bit and take your glasses off like I have. These headlights are very reminiscent of the Mustang, and this front grille kind of serves as a bit of a nod to the Mustang. It's a little bit deeper and a little bit narrower by the looks of it, but it looks aggressive. And the bonnet, all these creases, are properly Mustang. Coming further around the car, this one is the entry-level car. So it's got 18-inch wheels, but you can upgrade to 19s if you want. But of course, we've got an SUV look at the side. What's really interesting, no door handles. You've actually got little buttons on the side to get in and out of the car, which is very futuristic. Coupe-like roofline. I feel like we say that all the time now when it comes to SUVs. I thought they were all about practicality. Anyway, it makes it look sporty. Got this nice sloping fastback design. I wouldn't say that. The rear, I think, actually looks really good. This is where it gets properly Mustang. You've got the typical Mustang rear lights here and a big old Mustang badge. And there's also a small fin right here that looks a lot like what you get on the current Mustang GT. It isn't a Mustang as we know it, but I think it looks really great. In the back of the Mach-E, we've got 402 litres of storage space. Now that is smaller than some of the car's rivals. A Tesla Model Y, which isn't actually available in the UK yet, is bigger than what you get in the Mach-E, and also the Volkswagen ID.4. In fact, we've got one right here and we'll have a video up of that very soon. And when we do, I'll put a link to it in the top right-hand corner. But it may be smaller than some of its rivals, but you've got loads of space back here. And even though the roofline is quite low, you could still get 2-3 big suitcases back here. There's also a bit of storage under the boot floor as well. But that's not it. We've also got a frunk. Now, some electric cars come with this, but not all of them. So if I pop the bonnet, we'll find an extra 81 litres of storage. Now, this is a great place to put the charging cables, but you can take them out, and I don't know, if your shopping is overfilling or if you haven't been able to get anything in a suitcase, you could start tucking it down here. What I find really funny though is it's a very small space, but there's a button to actually release the frunk from within the front boot, because by law in America, I believe, all cars must have a button if they're in a boot, so if anyone's stuck in, they can jump out. I'll be really impressed though if you can fit in the front trunk of a Mach-E. Now at this point I would normally lift up the bonnet and talk about the engines, but we've got an electric car, so it's a little bit pointless. I'll jump into the batteries anyway. There are two options available on the Mach-E, an entry-level 68 kilowatt hour battery and a range-topping 88 kilowatt version, and that's the usable capacity and not the physical capacity. So if you go for an entry-level standard range Mustang Mach-E in rear-wheel drive form, you can get up to 273 miles of range. Go for an all-wheel drive version and that dips down to 248 miles. Then you can go for the bigger battery in rear-wheel drive form like we have in this car, offers up to 379 miles of range, which is very impressive. But if you go for an all-wheel drive car, that dips down to 335 miles. Oh, and as I was talking about earlier, we actually have a PIN code access on this door. So if you wanted to get in and out of your car by typing in a PIN, you can do. Now things get pretty complicated when you start going into the power outputs of this thing. So if you go for a standard range battery, it doesn't matter whether you go for a rear wheel drive car or an all wheel drive version, they both produce 265 brake horsepower. However, if you go for an extended range, if you go for a rear wheel drive car, that'll produce 290, whereas all wheel drive cars up that to 348. Performance though is pretty much the same across the range. The slowest cars go from 0 to 62 in 7 seconds, whereas the faster all-wheel drive ones, you're looking at a 0 to 62 time of 5.8. Now luckily pricing is a little bit more straightforward. So if you go for a rear-wheel drive car, prices start at £40,350, and that goes up to £46,650 if you go for the all-wheel drive model. There's also a first edition which comes in at a pretty expensive 58 grand and is fully loaded. The only thing though is that pretty much all trim levels are really well equipped. Of course, you could head over to yesauto.com to find amazing deals on new and used Mach-E's. In fact, check out the one I made on our sweet 3D configurator. So, is the Mach-E more Mustang on the inside? Well, not really. It feels very much like a big and very spacious family SUV. So we've got a wireless charging pad down here and two other little trays in which you can store stuff, two nice big cup holders as well, a big armrest with a really deep bin and also a 12-volt charger in there too. And the thing that dominates the dashboard is this gigantic portrait touchscreen, and it's very much inspired by Tesla's. But what makes it stand out from pretty much everything else though is that there's a physical dial integrated into the screen, and it's really cool. So it means if you're driving along and you completely ignore the buttons on your steering wheel, you can turn up or decrease the volume using the dial on the screen, and it looks like it's kind of just floating there on a magnet. I mean, it's glued down, but it does look really cool, and the on-off button is in the center. Now, the screen itself runs Ford's Sync 3 system, although it's a little bit different to tailor it to this electric platform. And on the surface, it's very good. It's really nice and clear to use. And in fact, I think it might be one of the best from a usability standpoint, because there's not actually a lot to go through on here. You've got a big button for Apple CarPlay, you've got your radio, and there's also a massive sat-nav screen in the center. But because we're in the middle of nowhere, it looks like, yeah, there's nothing on the screen. But it's a really nice, decent, and responsive map. My only real complaint with it is that it's a little bit laggy. So if you go in something like a Tesla, or we had the Polestar recently, the touchscreens are so good on those. They're really slick, properly responsive. In fact, you can see my impressions of the Tesla system by clicking the link in the top right-hand corner. But I find on this version here, it just all feels a little bit laggy, a bit like a budget version of its rivals. And yes, it is a little bit cheaper than a Tesla Model Y, but not massively so. I kind of wish the tech was a little bit better. And the only other thing I would say is that it's plonked right in the center of the dash and sits flush with the dash as well. Whereas on most cars, they're usually angled slightly more towards the driver. And I wish that was the case, because the screen quality itself, I can actually kind of see a big kind of white bar along the side of the screen of where it's lit. Just makes it look a little bit cheap and tacky. But that's my only complaint. Overall, I do think the system works pretty well. And there's also a really small little digital dashboard, and I absolutely love it, because on Teslas, or on the cheaper ones anyway, they get rid of the digital virtual cockpits altogether, and it's all done through this central screen. So it's nice to be able to see my speed and also the semi-autonomous settings, as well as the battery percentage well. So I think from a usability standpoint, the layout of this Mach-E is really very good. Wow, the back seats of this Mach-E are incredible. There is so much room back here. So I'm just under 6 foot, but there's so much space. Look at the amount of legroom that I have. I've got the driver's seat in my position, and you'd think that I had it all the way forward, but there's just bags of room. Now, our car also comes with the panoramic sunroof, which comes as standard on extended range cars. And panoramic roofs actually tend to cut into headroom a little bit, because you need to take up a little bit more space. But I've got so much headroom here, it's very easy to fit in the back. And the seats also slope downwards slightly towards the rear, so you kind of sink into them nicely. It feels a little bit like the Volkswagen ID.4. In fact, you can watch our video on that by clicking the link in the top right hand corner. So what else we got back here? We've also got an armrest. It's very basic. It's got 2 cup holders in it, but it doesn't need to be all that special. It's not like we're going to have champagne glasses in it like you get on a Maybach. And we've also got a bit of connectivity back here as well. We've got a regular USB and also a USB-C connector. But enough about the back seats. Let's see what it's like to drive. Now, before we go on the road, there's one thing we've got to figure out, and it's, can the Mach-E drift? Because the Mustang is all about big power slides and getting as much smoke from the rear wheels as possible when you're leaving a car meet. And as we have the rear wheel drive Mach-E, I thought we could give it a go. I also noticed as well that you can go into the car menu and turn off traction control. So let's see if we can drift it. Oh, bit of bite and floor it. Come on, yeah, there we go. Will it drift? Yes, the Mach-E will drift if you go for a rear wheel drive version. So you can pull power slides in the Mach-E, but does it feel like a sporty performance car on the road? And kind of a little bit yes, and a little bit no. On the one hand, it feels pretty damn quick. Now, we have the rear wheel drive version here, so it isn't actually the fastest one available, but there's still quite a lot of pace to it. And I guess that's partly because of it being an electric car. You have nearly instant torque, so you have a nice big shove every time you put your foot down. And while the car's 0 to 62 times aren't gonna blow the competition away, most electric cars are really quick from 0 to 30, and that's kind of when it matters the most. There's also a really nice weight to the steering as well, so you can throw it into a corner and feel like you're really manhandling the car around it. But what's a little bit strange is that if you are on a B road like I am at the moment, there's a softness to it, and that doesn't come as a huge surprise. Firstly, because we're in an electric SUV. SUVs are heavy, electric cars are heavy, put the two together and you have a very heavy car. But also we're on the 18-inch wheels with really thick sidewalls, so there is a little bit of lean when going around a corner. That being said, it doesn't feel like a very dynamic or sporty car when you really are getting a move on. The steering makes it feel like you're driving a performance car, but the actual dynamics of it itself aren't all that great. It does feel like a bit of a lump. But the Mach-E isn't trying to be a Mustang, even though it looks like one and it's called one. It very much is an electric SUV with a sporty edge. There are different driving modes though. So at the moment I've got it in whisper mode, which is where it's basically as quiet and as relaxed as it can be. Active gives you a bit of a balance, and then there's untamed, which we did earlier to get some skids in it, which, I mean, it feels really quick if you do that. And there's also a fake V8 sound that plays over the top. And I've heard a few people that don't really like it, but personally, I don't mind it. I actually think it's quite nice, and it's really quiet. It's a very, very subtle sound. It just gives the car a bit of character. So another mode that we've got in here is one pedal driving. And so what that does is when it's activated, it gently applies the brakes, and that's used to regenerate energy. It puts energy back into the battery. If you are a lifelong Mustang driver and this is your first family car or first electric car, it's going to take a little bit of getting used to. But once you do get the hang of it, it's really great because you can play a little game with yourself of trying to ease off the accelerator just in time so that your car comes to a complete stop when you get to the traffic lights. So this car here with the extended battery has a WLTP rated range of 379 miles, which is massive. In fact, it's one of the biggest on the market. Now, when you're actually realistically driving that, it's unlikely you're going to get all that close to using 379 miles, but you're going to get around 300, which isn't too bad at all. And again, are there many occasions where you need to go out and do a 300-mile round trip in one day? And a lot of the time you can also just stop off at a charging station and just go and top it up through there. And one of the great things about the Mach-E is not only have we got big batteries, but it also supports fast charging. So if you go for the standard range cars, the standard range batteries, they support up to 115 kilowatt charges, but the extended range, that goes up to 150 kilowatts. So that'll get you up to around 73 miles of charge in the space of 10 minutes, which really isn't too bad. So if you are stranded somewhere, you can just pop over to a fast charger if you can find one, top up in 10 minutes, and you're back on your way again. The Mach-E feels really at home on the motorway as well. It's really quiet in here, and while there's a little bit of wind noise, there's barely any road noise whatsoever. And in whisper mode, which I have it in at the moment, it is very calm and relaxed. So we've also got some pretty cool tech in here. Not only do we have active cruise control to prevent us from ploughing into the back of somebody on the motorway if they slow down while it's activated, we also have lane keep assistance. So what the car will do is it'll monitor the white lines and keep the car in the center of the road, a bit like a watered down version of Tesla's autopilot. And just like that, you've also got to keep your hands on the steering wheel. But it works really well and makes the Mach-E a really great motorway cruiser. Now, if you've got your heart set on a Mach-E, I'd probably recommend sticking with the rear-wheel drive version and getting the extended range battery. You'll pay a little bit more to get the bigger battery, but it's significantly cheaper than going for the all-wheel drive car. This still feels really punchy with the rear wheels powered only, but you've also got more range, and ultimately the way it drives will be pretty much exactly the same as the all-wheel drive car. I don't think it's the best electric SUV out there, but it's definitely different. There aren't that many cars like the Mustang Mach-E, and while it's not a proper sports SUV, it's probably the sportiest electric SUV there currently is. And it feels really cool with that big Mustang-like bonnet extending out in front of you. Of course, you could always head over to yesauto.com to check out all the deals we've got on new and used Mustang Mach-E's when they become available. Does it justify the Mustang name? Not really. But what it does mean is it might mean that the Mustang as we know it, the coupe or convertible with a V8 or a 4-cylinder, can stick around a little bit longer, and that's by no means a bad thing. And by itself, this Mustang really is a very good product. And if you're a Mustang fan, I think it probably would make a very good daily driver, and you can savour the weekends for a bit of V8 action.